Hey friends, welcome back for another chapter of Charlotte's Web. Today we have reached chapter number 19 called The Egg Sack. If you remember, in the last chapter, all the people were at the fair all day long and they had a great time going on the rides and eating the food and seeing the sights while Wilbur laid in his pen and was preparing for the award ceremony and the judges to come around to award the prizes for the best pig. Charlotte had wrote one final word in her web that Templeton found in a newspaper scrap on the fairgrounds, and the word was humble. The word humble means somebody that's not proud. When you're humble, that means you don't brag about anything. You're just happy to be yourself and to do good things just for the sake of doing good things to help people out. Okay, you don't do something so that people can think that you're awesome or you want an award for it. You do it just because it's the right thing to do. That's what humble means. So today we're going to read all about Charlotte's egg sack in chapter 19. Are you ready? Here we go. Next morning, when the first light came into the sky and the sparrows stirred in the trees, when the cows rattled their chains and the rooster crowed and the early automobiles went whispering along the road, Wilbur awoke and looked for Charlotte. He saw her up overhead in the corner near the back of the pen. She was very quiet. Her 8 legs were spread wide. She seemed to have shrunk during the night. Next to her, attached to the ceiling, Wilbur saw a curious object. It was sort of a sack or a cocoon. It was peach-colored and looked as though it was made of cotton candy. "Are you awake, Charlotte?" he said softly. "Yes," came the answer. "What's that nifty little thing? Did you make it?" "I did, indeed," replied Charlotte in a weak voice. "Is it a plaything?" "Plaything? I should say not. It is my egg sack, my magnum opus." "I don't know what a magnum opus is," said Wilbur. "That's Latin," explained Charlotte. "It means great work. This egg sack is my great work, the finest thing I had ever made." "What's inside it?" asked Wilbur. "Eggs?" 514 of them, she replied. 514, said Wilbur. "You're kidding." "No, I'm not. I counted them. I got started counting, so I kept on, just to keep my mind occupied." "It's a perfectly beautiful egg sack," said Wilbur, feeling as happy as though he had constructed it himself. "Yes, it is pretty," replied Charlotte, patting the sack with her 2 front legs. "Anyway, I can guarantee that it is strong. It is made out of the toughest material I have. It is also waterproof. The eggs are inside and will be warm and dry." So there's a picture of Charlotte's egg sack. 514 baby spider eggs inside that egg sack. That's amazing. "Charlotte," said Wilbur dreamily, "are you really going to have 514 children?" "If nothing happens, yes," she said. "Of course, they won't show up until next spring." Wilbur noticed that Charlotte's voice sounded sad. What makes you sound so downhearted? I should think you'd be terribly happy about this." "Oh, don't pay any attention to me," said Charlotte. "I just don't have much pep anymore. I guess I feel sad because I won't ever see my children." "What do you mean you won't see your children? Of course you will. We'll all see them. It's going to be simply wonderful next spring in the barn cellar when 514 baby spiders running around all over the place. And the geese will have a new set of goslings, and the sheep will have their new lambs." "Maybe," said Charlotte quietly. "However, I have a feeling I'm not going to see the results of last night's efforts. I don't feel good at all. I think I'm languishing, to tell you the truth." Wilbur didn't understand the word languish, and he hated to bother Charlotte by asking her to explain. But he was so worried, he felt he had to ask. "What does languishing mean?" "It means I'm slowing up, feeling my age. I'm not young anymore, Wilbur. But I don't want you to worry about me. Today is your big day. Look at my web. Doesn't it show up well with the dew on it? Charlotte's web never looked more beautiful than it looked this morning. Each strand held dozens of bright drops of early morning dew. The light from the east struck it and made it all plain and clear. It was a perfect piece of designing and building. In another hour or two, a steady stream of people would pass by, admiring it and reading it and looking at Wilbur and marveling at the miracle. As Wilbur was studying the web, a pair of whiskers and a sharp face appeared. Slowly, Templeton dragged himself across the pen and threw himself down in the corner. "I'm back," he said in a husky voice. "What a night!" The rat was swollen to twice his normal size. His stomach was as big around as a jelly jar. Wow, look at Templeton now. "What a night," he repeated hoarsely. "What feasting and carousing, a real gorge. I must have eaten the remains of 30 lunches. Never have I seen excuse me. Never have I seen the leavings and everything well ripened and seasoned with the passage of time and the heat of day. Oh, it was rich, my friends, rich." "You ought to be ashamed of yourself," said Charlotte in disgust. "It would serve you right if you had an acute attack of indigestion." "Don't worry about my stomach," snarled Templeton. "It can handle anything. And by the way, I got some bad news. As I came past the pig next door, the one that calls himself Uncle, I noticed a blue tag on the front of his pen. That means he won first prize. I guess you're licked, Wilbur. You might as well just relax. Nobody's going to hang any medal on you. Furthermore, I wouldn't be surprised if Zuckerman changes his mind about you. Wait till he gets the hankering for some fresh pork and smoked ham and crisp bacon. He'll take a knife to you, my boy." "Be still, Templeton," said Charlotte. "You're too stuffed and bloated to know what you're saying. Don't pay any attention to him, Wilbur." Wilbur tried not to think about what the rat had just said. He decided to change the subject. "Templeton," said Wilbur, "if you weren't so dopey, you wouldn't have noticed that Charlotte had made an egg sack. She's going to become a mother. For your information, there are 514 eggs in that peachy little sack." "Is this true?" asked the rat, eyeing the sack suspiciously. "Yes, it's true," sighed Charlotte. "Congratulations," murmured Templeton. "This has been a night." He closed his eyes, pulled some straw up over himself, and dropped off into a deep sleep. Wilbur and Charlotte were glad to be rid of him for a while. At 9 o'clock, Mr. Arable's truck rolled into the fairgrounds and came to a stop at Wilbur's pen. Everybody climbed out. "Look," cried Fern. "Look at Charlotte's web. Look what it says." The grown-ups and the children joined hands and stood there, studying the new sign. "Humble," said Mr. Zuckerman. "Now, isn't that just the word for Wilbur?" Everyone rejoiced to find that the miracle of the web had been repeated. Wilbur gazed up lovingly at their faces. He looked very humble and very grateful. Fern winked at Charlotte. Lurvy soon got busy. He poured a bucket of warm slops into the trough, and while Wilbur ate his breakfast, Lurvy scratched him gently with a smooth stick. "Wait a minute," cried Avery. "Look at this." He pointed to the blue tag on Uncle's pen. "This pig won first prize already." The Zuckermans and the Arables stared at the tag. Mrs. Zuckerman began to cry. Nobody said a word. They just stared at the tag. Then they stared at Uncle. Then they stared at the tag again. Lurvy took out an enormous handkerchief and blew his nose very loud. So loud, in fact, that the noise was heard by stable boys over in the horse barn. "Can I have some money?" asked Fern. "I want to go out on the midway." "You stay right where you are," said her mother. Tears came to Fern's eyes. "What is everybody crying about?" asked Mr. Zuckerman. "Let's get busy, Edith. Bring the buttermilk." Mrs. Zuckerman wiped her eyes with her handkerchief. She went to the truck and came back with a gallon jar of buttermilk. "Bath time," said Zuckerman cheerfully. He and Mrs. Zuckerman and Avery climbed into Wilbur's pen. Avery slowly poured buttermilk over Wilbur's head and on his back, and as it trickled down his sides and his cheeks, Mr. and Mrs. Zuckerman rubbed it into his hair and skin. Passersby stopped to watch. Pretty soon, quite a crowd had gathered. Wilbur grew beautifully white and smooth. The morning sun shone through his pink ears. "He isn't as big as the pig next door," remarked one bystander, "but he's cleaner. That's what I like." "So do I," said another man. "He's humble, too," said a woman, reading the sign in the web. Everybody who visited the pig pen had a good word to say about Wilbur. Everybody admired the web. And, of course, nobody noticed Charlotte. Suddenly a voice was heard on the loudspeaker. "Attention, please," it said. "Will Mr. Homer Zuckerman bring his famous pig to the judge's booth in the front of the grandstand? A special award will be made there in 20 minutes. Everyone is invited to attend. Crate your pig, please, Mr. Zuckerman, and report to the judge's booth promptly." For a moment after the announcement, the Arables and Zuckermans were unable to speak or move. Then Avery picked up a handful of straw and threw it in the air and gave a loud yell. The straw fluttered down like confetti into Fern's hair. Mr. Zuckerman hugged Mrs. Zuckerman. Mr. Arable kissed Mrs. Arable. Avery kissed Wilbur. Lurvy shook hands with everybody. Fern hugged her mother. Avery hugged Fern. Mrs. Arable hugged Mrs. Zuckerman. Up overhead, in the shadows of the ceiling, Charlotte crouched unseen, her front legs encircling her egg sack. Her heart was not beating as strongly as usual, and she felt very weary and old. But she was sure at last she had saved Wilbur's life, and she felt peaceful and contented. "We have no time to lose," shouted Mr. Zuckerman. "Lurvy, help with the crate." "Can I have some money?" asked Fern. "You wait," said Mrs. Arable. "Can't you see everybody is busy?" "Put that empty buttermilk jar into the truck," commanded Mr. Arable. Avery grabbed the jar and rushed to the truck. "Does my hair look all right?" asked Mrs. Zuckerman. "Looks fine," snapped Mr. Zuckerman, and he and Lurvy set the crate down in front of Wilbur. "You didn't even look at my hair," said Mrs. Zuckerman. "You're all right, Edith," said Mrs. Arable. "Just keep calm." Templeton, asleep in the straw, heard the commotion and awoke. He didn't know exactly what was going on, but when he saw the man shoving Wilbur into the crate, he made up his mind that he was going along. He watched his chance, and when nobody was looking, he crept into the crate and buried himself in the straw at the bottom. "All righty, boys," cried Mr. Zuckerman. "Let's go." He and Mr. Arable and Lurvy and Avery grabbed the crate and boosted it up over the side of the pen and up into the truck. Fern jumped aboard and sat on top of the crate. She still had straw in her hair and looked very pretty and excited. Mr. Arable started the motor. Everybody climbed in, and they drove to the judge's booth in the front of the grandstand. As they passed the Ferris wheel, Fern gazed up at it and wished she was at the topmost car with Henry Fussy at her side. And that's the end of chapter 19. Only 3 more chapters to go. Next time we read, it will be chapter 20, called The Hour of Triumph. Thanks for listening. We'll see you again next time.